I would say mine's a little bit longer, so I'm going to go with about a quarter of the way full. Yes.
Is it a good idea to retrieve the dirt that you knocked off of it originally, or go with new stuff?
I would go with the new stuff. If a little bit of the older stuff gets in there, that's totally okay too. That's just going to make sure that the mycorrhiza and fungal, beneficial fungus in the soil is going to be able to help keep the plant healthy. And so I've got mine about a quarter of the way full, and I just set my plant right on top of that. And it looks like my roots are going to be coiled just a little bit, but because the bowl shape is a little bit round, it's got some room to go out and down and around. So the plants in these pots should be okay for a year or so. But what I would suggest is if you notice the plant is needing water maybe once a week, twice a week, it's probably going to need repotting pretty soon.
Do you want to keep this above the pot?
So I like to keep my soil line about a quarter to a half inch below the pot line. Reason being is whenever you water, it prevents the water from rolling right off the side and really gets into that soil. All right, and at this point we're gonna gently press the soil in and around the root system. We wanna press it gentle enough where we're not compacting the soil, but we wanna make sure that there's not any large air pockets sitting around the roots. And while we're messing with the soil, I think it's a great time to look at the texture of potting mixes. So with potting mixes, we always want to do a really well draining soil mix. Plants that sit too long in wet conditions are often going to get fungal issues, turn yellow. And so the mix that we're using is an organic potting mix. I really like it because it's got some bark in there to keep it airy instead of a ton of perlite.
Instead of what?
Instead of perlite. Perlite is a white, like almost like a
Styrofoam?
yeah, kind of like styrofoam. It's like a natural rock, but has like a styrofoam consistency. Yeah. I think that's it. Yeah.
You had a question?
Yes. So I was at Starbucks and I saw that they give away their coffee beans,
Oh yes.
like in bags.
Mhm.
So, I know I didn't know they did that. It's by the door, you guys.
Okay.
They're great. Coffee beans?
Interesting.
So, I am wanting to repot some plants today.
Okay.
Can I just like mix that in? And if I do, how much?
Yeah, so what I would do is sprinkle a little on top of the soil, maybe depending on the plant size. I would say a 4-inch pot to probably a 6-inch pot. I would only do about 2-3 tablespoons and just mix that into the top inch of the soil. If you wanted to do larger plants, I'd probably do about a quarter of a cup for like an 8, 10-inch, and a 12-inch pot.
Okay.
Should be set there, but
So just on the bottom.
yep, just on top is perfect. The benefit to putting it on top is you are more easily able to control the dilution. So whenever you're watering, it's going to gently go throughout the root system instead of hitting the roots immediately.
Okay.
I would say it's the most similar to what plants experience in nature with that fungal compost layer right on top of the soil that gently trickles down into the roots.
Is there a benefit that you know of, like a really good benefit of the coffee grounds? Or is it just
Coffee grounds add nitrogen into the soil. And so with tropical plants, nitrogen is really what's going to push the foliage growth. And whenever we talk about fertilizers too, I can kind of explain like the NPKs and stuff like that. It gives me a chance to really nerd out about plants, so I love it. How's everyone doing with their potting so far? Sweet. All right.
Okay, now, how often do we put coffee grounds on the top?
What I would do is once a month. So Yeah, they break down pretty easily, especially after they've been in like a coffee press or in a coffee machine because of the heat. And so they break down relatively easily, so I would do it about once a month.
It's funny when you say coffee grounds break down because I relate to them as water soluble and not breaking down, but once they're with the soil and living with
the
the
microbiome. Yeah.
then it's gonna break down.
Absolutely.
Okay, alright.
It's not going to be as effective as using like an organic fertilizer, but it is still going to be pretty effective.
Okay.
All right, and so then we have got our plants potted here. They're all set, and so with everyone's plant, what I would suggest is probably watering it when you get home. The soil here is pretty dry, and so what I would do is a thorough watering, which is going to take us into our next slide, which is going to be talking about watering our plants. So, I always like to say that it's not about the amount of water that you're giving the plant, it's more about the frequency. And so a little bit more detail on that is plants, whenever you water them, they want to be thoroughly watered. So you want to make sure that the soil is totally saturated. A lot of the times whenever we repot our plants or the plant gets a little bit too dry, you're going to notice something like this. This is hydrophobic soil. Essentially at this point, the plant has dried out so much that the soil is clinging to itself instead of wanting to cling to water. So what I see a lot, especially with plants like this, is the fiddle leaf figs. They have a tendency to really compact their soil because their root systems are so intense. But with that, you want to water for 15 minutes, and then water again. So by hitting it twice, that first water is going to kind of wake the soil up. You might not thoroughly saturate the soil at that point, but it's going to get the soil ready to take in a little bit more water. Then I follow that up 15 minutes later, I'll thoroughly water again, and at that point, that's when the soil is going to be thoroughly saturated. And so you can kind of see right here that the top and the bottom are pretty wet, but the center right here is really dry. That's really where this hydrophobic soil hangs out. So what I like to do is get a wooden, like a wooden skewer or a wooden pencil and just push it into my soil whenever I'm about to water, just to check the water levels. You can also use your fingers. I always like to say our hands are some of the best gardening tools that we've ever been given, and so I love getting my hands in the soil and really feeling what's going on there. And then you'll want to water whenever the top 3 inches are dry. So in a pot like this, I would water whenever it's about halfway dry right here. Just sticking my finger in there, checking what's going on, or using that wooden pencil.
Are you also good with the ones that tell you how?
Oh,
Moisture meter.
Thank you.
So what I have found is moisture meters were really, really helpful whenever I was first getting into gardening, because it is a tried and true way. You stick the skewer in there and it tells you what level your plant is at. I usually like to use a moisture meter and check it a couple of times around the pot and make sure everything is okay there, and I'm not checking like one spot that's a little bit drier than the rest. But with that, those moisture meters will come with a book that tells you, like for example, monsteras need to be at a moisture level of 4. So if it ever goes below a 4, you water and it's all set. But yeah, so I love a moisture meter. I don't use them as much now because I've got so many plants, but moisture meters are a really great tool.
What I did not know is that you're not ever supposed to put it underwater because that apparently breaks it.
I did not know that either. That is a great bit of advice.
Good to know.
Because I was like, why is this not working?
Mhm.
So I looked at the booklet and it's there. It says for you not to run underwater and just to like wipe it clean. But I feel like it should be in the front cover.
Yes.
Right.
Like big red label on the front.
Yeah.
No water.
Where's the whole food?
Yes.
When you say completely saturated, do you mean like the water is coming out and through the hole? Like at that point, you
Yeah.
know that it's gone all the way through the plant?
Right, and so, yes, we're looking at this hydrophobic soil again. What happens here is whenever it gets that compact, is watering it, you're gonna notice that the water is gonna go pretty quickly throughout the pot.
Yeah.
And so the top and the bottom are gonna be saturated. And so, that's why I like to go back a second time 15 minutes later, especially if it's really dry.
Just ran for
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I like to, sometimes I'll take my plants and just hold them under the faucet and like at the sink for a second, making sure that even when I see the water is coming through, I'll hold it there for like 5 seconds more just to make sure that I've got a ton of water in there. Because we want to make sure that the soil is holding all of the water that it can without any pockets of air or anything like that.
So, can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah, absolutely.
I've got a couple of plants that are, that follow what you're describing right now of needing to be watered twice, 15 minutes apart.
Mhm.
Can I remedy that by changing out the soil so that I don't have to do that? Or is your feedback that it's just that type of plant that's gonna do it, even if I change the environment with this, like doing new soil, I'm still gonna have to water it twice?
I'm glad you asked. That brings us to right here, watering our house plants. So there's two main ways that people water their house plants, and it's bottom watering or top watering. Top watering is usually going to be a nice watering can over the top. That's the one that I've been referencing the most, especially with like holding under the sink too. That's going to be top watering. However, when a plant is really hydrophobic and is needing to be watered like twice to wake up the soil, I like to bottom water. And so what bottom watering does is it allows the plant to naturally absorb the water that it needs in the soil. Soil acts like a sponge, and so when it's hydrophobic, it's kind of clinging to itself, but allowing it to sit in about a quarter to half an inch of water is going to allow the soil to soak up as much water as it can. And so if you're ever facing a plant that is needing a lot of water and you know it's not root bound, I would definitely suggest bottom watering. It's what I do with a lot of my anthuriums, because they generally get pretty root bound pretty quick. But it allows the soil to really absorb as much as it can.
And if I also don't want to bottom water, can I change the soil?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So if you don't want to bottom water,
Make a difference though?
so no, not necessarily. So I would say bottom watering is really making sure that you're utilizing the soil to its fullest extent.
Okay.
But if you need to
Swap
switch
the
it out,
soil, see
yeah.
what happens.
I
If
mean,
it doesn't make a difference, then I gotta
And
bottom
we have like a cocoa loco soil or cocoa core that is going to retain more moisture and be less likely to go hydrophobic. So that could be a good option for something that you're gonna want to like let dry out and may become hydrophobic more often than another plant. But that's gonna be specifically this soil in the middle, the
black bag.
that black bag there.
Help me understand the word hydrophobic, because it sounds to me like it's a layer of water, and I don't think that's what it means.
It just is when the soil is so dry that it will not absorb it anymore. And so, yeah.
Like your soil is Scotch guarded, essentially, is kind of what happens.
Okay.
It just prevents water from getting in.
Okay.
And then I did want to add over here too, we've got some stages of watering. This is what your plant is going to look like if it's overwatered. You're going to notice that the leaves are starting to turn yellow. It's still going to be upright, but you're going to notice the leaves are turning yellow and the tips are going to be browning. You'll also notice that those leaves will usually be curling downwards. And then an underwatered plant is going to sometimes turn yellow, sometimes turn brown. But the biggest thing with the underwatered plants is they are going to droop. And so if a plant is underwatered and it's drooping, it's able to be saved. If it's overwatered, I would stop watering as soon as possible. And with that, it should be okay. What I usually like to do is if my plants have been overwatered, I usually want to repot them just to make sure that the root systems are okay. And so I'll usually pull them out of there, make sure that there's no browning on the roots, and if there is, I'll just take a nice clean pair of pruners and cut any of the dying material back. All right, so now we're going to talk about fertilizing. This is one of my favorite things with houseplants because it is the science behind it's real neat. So, is anyone familiar with the NPK ratios on fertilizers? Okay, so for those of you that aren't, I'm glad I get to talk about it. So, the NPK is going to stand for the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium ratio in the plants. Your nitrogen is going to focus on building leaves. And so with this tropical fertilizer, we've got a little bit higher of a nitrogen. So it is going to impact the foliage growth. So without nitrogen, the plants are not gonna grow as well. And then phosphorus is going to boost the plant's metabolism. We generally carry a fungicide called Plant Doctor, which treats the plant by giving it more phosphorus, so it has a hardier immune system. And so the phosphorus number is a little bit lower in tropicals just because we use really well-draining soils and they tend to get a little bit more attention than our outdoor landscaping plants. But the phosphorus is also going to help with buds and blooms and fruiting. So outdoor plants, especially like your roses, you'll want to make sure that number is a little bit higher to really get those flowers going. And then finally, the last number is potassium. Potassium is strictly working on the roots. And so when you've got a healthy root system, you've got a healthy plant. And so with the NPK ratio here, we've got the 4 up front that's hitting on our leaves. So we're gonna make sure that we're first getting really large, healthy foliage growth. We're gonna make sure that the plant is staying healthy. And then at the end, we're gonna make sure that the plant has a healthy root system. And so with that, kind of hitting those 3 areas, you'll be on a pretty consistent schedule of needing to repot once a year because your plant is gonna be growing and doing really well. So with that, I really like to use organic fertilizers. I'm referencing this one up here. It's the one that I use on all my tropicals, palm tropicals and hibiscus. It works really well on the houseplants especially. This is a granular, which means you can sprinkle it right on top of your soil and you're good to go. And so fertilizing with organics is really a foolproof way to fertilize your plants. So what I put over here was this is the Swiss cheese vine. They also call them monsteras. That leaf is showing signs of being over fertilized. And so with products like Miracle Grow, it's a concentrated salt, and when the salt builds up in the soil too much, you're gonna notice that the leaves are gonna be turning yellow and start to brown like that. The plant will still be upright, but it's gonna look like it's getting sunburnt. Yes?
Could I get you to move that
Oh.
plant right there?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, so this is what it looks like when a plant is over-fertilized. Fortunately, with organics, you don't really run into that issue. This is one that you can sprinkle on once every, technically you're supposed to do it once every 3 months. I like to dilute it a little bit and use less once a month. That way the plant is getting consistently fed, but I'm not overdoing it. And then, good rule of thumb with fertilizing your plants is whenever you start seeing new growth, it's time to feed. So if it's showing signs of wanting to grow, that's a great time to give it the food that it needs to grow. This time of the year especially, I think all of these plants should be showing quite a bit of new growth on them. It's a great time to get them a little bit of food, get them going, and they'll be ready for spring. Yes?
What about the difference in numbers? So we know what they stand for
Mhm.
and what the different, like if there's more for potassium and nitrogen, but what about like the actual number? So like instead of 4 being 6.
Okay.
Like how does the increase in the number?
So fortunately with organics, it's not necessarily about it's more about the ratio of the numbers. And so the numbers can be larger, but generally you're gonna see a pretty balanced ratio with organics. With organic fertilizers, it's more important about where the nutrients are coming from, and less about the amount of salt. So with Miracle Grow, I feel like sometimes you can see it as like a 20-20-20 ratio, which is really high, but it is because it's a concentrated salt.
Right.
Because this is broken down, let's see which this one is specifically.
Even looking like at the ultimate.
Oh,
It
this
does
guy.
have like another one that's a different shade, right? Not the seaweed.
Yeah.
Like a turquoise-y one?
Yeah, we've got the Microlife Ultimate over there, which is so the Ultimate is gonna be a 624.
This
Oh,
guy
sorry.
is the 846. That's
Yeah.
gonna be the Biomatrix.
So the 846 is really good for new plantings. A lot of people use it on their flowers and vegetables because it is a higher concentration of those nutrients that are a little bit easier for the plant to access. With that, this one I would say is just as effective. I would say it depends on your goal. So like,
If it's not a new plant, it is just like the feeding that you're gonna be doing, like as it's being established, you would give that. But if it's like this, for example, would you give something like that? I know, I'm so sorry.
no, that's okay. I would
Hard
so
questions.
so I would be comfortable. I'm gonna put this on mine whenever I get home. But the 846 is also a really good option, especially if you're doing other gardening. I would say that has broader application use. But the 846, I do love the 846 because I mean it really pushes out growth. Like I mean, it's almost like giving your plant steroids and they're ready to go. This one is going to be a little bit slower start, slow and steady, but consistency I would say is key here. And so we're doing all this as spring is around the corner. Actually, we just hit our first day of spring, loving this weather. The plants are too. And so the plants are really going to want to start growing. So we're going to go ahead and hit them with fertilizers and make sure they've got the nutrients that they need to really do their best.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Let's see. All right. And so I found some of the nastiest pictures I could find of pests. They are bane of my existence, but fortunately it's all treatable. So with spring, the plants are growing, the animals are growing, you're gonna hear birds around and everything like that, but the issue that we're also running into is that the bugs are out and about. So first we have got spider mites. I would say spider mites are probably the most common problem that I run into with my houseplants. Especially as spring comes around the corner, what happens is things start warming up. If the plants are a little bit dusty, the spider mites are going to be attracted to those plants, and then it just kind of carries on through summer. But there's some things that we'll be able to treat. Mealybugs are the next most common, I would say, and they have soft little white fuzzy bodies. So if you notice your plant has like cotton looking on it, especially in the cracks and crevices, that is likely what those are. Easy treatment too, and we'll go through that. And then aphids are on the end. Aphids can come in so many different shapes, colors, sizes, but they are generally going to have this soft body look with the legs. Aphids are probably the cutest of the group, I would say. So they are not ideal, but I dislike them less. And so with spider mites, what I really like to do is definitely treat my plants with neem after repotting and before they go outside or into their spot. And so we've got some neem up here. I love the ready to use because you just want to spray until you start seeing it drip off the plant a little bit. Make sure that you're hitting the front and the back sides of the leaf. That is not only going to create a really nice like shine on your plant, but it's going to prevent bugs and treat anything that could be there. So these spider mites are microscopic and they are pretty hard to see, but what you'll notice about spider mites is they will leave little stippling throughout your leaf, like little white spots. And eventually, if not treated, they'll start to create a bit of webbing. Fortunately, the plants that we did today are not super spider mite prone. I would say, especially if you do alocasias or caladiums or anything like that, they are definitely going to need that neem treatment before you send them outside or have them on your patio or in a house. So, with mealybugs, what I like to use is, let me back up for a sec. Neem can treat all three of these all day long, easy. I love to use neem to treat any of it, especially on my indoor stuff. I tend not to use neem on anything that's going to be flowering or fruiting outdoors. Just out of caution for pollinators. Yes?
Do you have to do anything with the soil as well, or is it just the leaves?
Just the leaves. And so the neem is going to make, I would say the neem is the most, like, fastest and most effective way to treat your pests. What we've also got up here is high yield systemic granulars and then houseplant systemic. Houseplant systemic granules are going to be another like little bits that you can sprinkle onto your soil. I believe it's like a tablespoon per 6 inches, but the directions are in there more specific. The way that systemic granules work is they break down into the soil. The plant is able to take it up through its root system and essentially turns the plant toxic to pests. So if something bites it, especially like a spider mite, it's just going to be knocked out. So it creates a little bit of a toxicity for those pests, so they want to avoid the plants. Yes.
Is that toxic to pets as well?
Yes.
I would say yes. Yeah, I mean, just to be safe.
It says toxic to pets, kids, or anybody that, like, if anything that is edible, or if anybody
Ingested.
But yeah, I have the house plant.
And I only use this on my tropicals and houseplants. I don't use it on anything outdoors, especially things that are fruiting, pollinating, anything like that.
What about the neem oil? Is the neem oil safe? I don't know, my sister just was talking to me about this and was
So-
like it's safe for all kinds of things.
The neem is safe. My only suggestion with the neem is it can be a bit abrasive. So if you do get it on your skin, I usually like to wash it off, especially if your skin is a little bit more sensitive. The concentrations that they use for horticultural uses are going to be a little bit stronger than that of what they use in cosmetics. Because the neem is occasionally used in certain cosmetics as like a something for skin. I'm not supposed to look into that, but I did look into it because it's a really cool product. Ow, yep.
Interesting.
I have not used it as a mosquito repellent, but it does kind of have that astringent smell, which is why I also wanted to recommend another option if you are sensitive to smells or have your plants inside and are not really wanting to go that route. We've got something called Peppermint Fury. So what's really cool about Peppermint Fury is it actually uses peppermint oil, and so it's going to have this really nice, light, refreshing scent. It's also going to treat the plant, act as a shine for the plant, and it's also pollinator safe. So if you have your plants outside. Yes.
Are these, the neem oil and peppermint, are they preventatives or treatments?
Both. If you notice the pest problem, I usually like to spray my plants once a day for 7 days and really just knock it out of the park, make sure that I don't have that issue anymore. And then what I will do once I've treated the pests is I'll use either one of them once a week. Whenever I go to once a week to once every 2 weeks whenever I water my plants. I like to just do my whole schedule, water, fertilize, pest treatment all at one time, or pest preventative.
Does that work on mealybugs? Because don't mealybugs get into like the roots or they'll like lay eggs in the roots or something like that too? I tried everything to get rid of mealybugs on one of my plants and they kept coming back.
So what I like to do with mealybugs, it works as a good preventative on the leaves. So if you're doing the once a week, they'll try to bite the leaf and they shouldn't, they should die back. But I usually like to use soap to treat mealybugs. So what I'll do is I'll do about a teaspoon per gallon of water of Dawn dish liquid or any kind of dish soap. And then I will put that in a sprayer and I'll just spray the plant where the mealybugs are. What that does is it creates kind of like an insecticidal soap. And with that insecticidal soap, it's going to coat the body of the mealybug and essentially suffocate them out. Which,
As they should.
yes, absolutely. I was about to say, look at them. They love that.
So gross.
You just leave it on, you don't wipe it off.
No, I won't. I will, at the end of the treatment cycle, usually spray with one of our oils just to, get some of it off. But usually after one spray of the insecticidal soap mix that I was talking about, the Dawn dish liquid and water, it should be enough to treat the mealybugs that are there. Yes.
Would it be an overkill to use both neem and peppermint? And I only ask because I'm not a fan of the smell of neem oil.
Okay.
And the
Do not
kit
like
that you
it.
guys have that has mixed with the lemon and stuff.
Oh, yes.
That one is way better.
Yeah.
But I feel like peppermint would really be better in terms of smell.
I would say you could do both.
Neem. Okay.
Yeah, I would say there's not really any issue. What I would probably do is do a light misting of the neem, and then I would follow it up with a little bit of a heavier peppermint fury.
Is one more question, the peppermint, would that be also an issue for sunlight? Cause I know neem, you don't want it to have any sun.
Absolutely. So any of these oils, any pest treatment that's going to be a foliar spray, I usually like to do it really early in the morning or late in the evening or afternoon after the sun is kind of cooled off a little bit. And so you just want to make sure that the sun has cooled off and they're not in direct sun, and they should be all right. And then with aphids, the pest treatments that we talked about are great. I like to get a water hose usually, if I've got access to it, and just spray them off. It is a little bit aggressive, but if you put your hose on like a jet mode, you get as many of them off as you can, and then you can either treat with neem, the peppermint fury, or the insecticidal soap mix.
Is that what crepe myrtles have a lot of? Is it aphids or spiders?
Aphids. So crepe myrtles, this past year was really bad for aphids. Oh,
All over the lawn trees.
all over the trees. If you parked under a tree, your car was a dewy mess. And so it's harder to treat them on that scale. I would say usually at that point, like with trees and stuff like that, they just have to kind of ride their cycle out because they come and then the ladybugs usually come right behind them. And so unfortunately with trees and stuff, yes.
What purpose do they serve, like, with their cycle? I mean, do they do anything positive?
They feed ladybugs.
Yeah.
And yeah, we love ladybugs. So they do act as food for smaller insects. So a lot of the beneficial bugs that we'll carry, like the green lacewing eggs, will eat the spider mites and the aphids, and then I believe they also eat the mealybug larva, and then the mantis will eat all of them. Mantis eat everything; they love it, and so we generally carry those as well, like the mantis egg sacs and stuff like that. But the systemic granules, I would say, are the lowest maintenance. So I like to consider myself a lazy gardener. I want my plants to bring me joy and not stress. And so with that, I usually like to treat my plants with the systemic whenever I first get them. And once I do that, I can just set them in their spot, let them do their thing, and I generally won't have pests in my space to have to treat. So I've got the systemics working, and then I can just spray once a week with the peppermint fury, kind of lighten up the air in the room, help the plants get a little bit of a shine, preventative stuff like that. Yes?
What about gnats?
Gnats, well, I'm glad you brought it up because I got a product for that too. So over here on the end is mosquito bits. Mosquito bits are a game changer when it comes to fungal gnats. So a few important things to remember about fungal gnats are, the biggest one I would say is that fungal gnats occur whenever the soil is allowed to stay too wet for too long. So what I usually like to do is, if that is happening, I'll move it to a draftier spot, kind of let it dry out. Make sure that the plant has a hole in the bottom of its pot, and then I'll also make sure that we move it to a drafty spot. Those two things for now. I'll make sure to do those two things. And if push comes to shove, I will repot my plants if the fungal gnats are bad enough or they've really established.
Does that have to do with the soil that you use as well? I heard that from somebody.
I would say yes. That's why we like to use a really well-draining soil mix for potting mixes. With that, it's going to prevent the soil from staying too wet for too long. And so what I like to do with the mosquito bits is I'll either sprinkle them right on top of the soil, like I do with all of the other granules that I have up here, or you can mix it with water and incorporate it into your watering cycle. The way the mosquito bits works is the mosquito bits are going to kill the fungal gnat larva in the soil, so they're not going to be able to reproduce there. I also like to get sticky fly traps, like stick them in the pot, and anything that's flying around is going to be attracted to that, and anything in the soil is going to be treated with the mosquito bits.
But
I work at a school, and part of the children's job is to water all the plants, so we're constantly watering plants that are constantly wet because there's so many children. So what are some more beneficial plants for the classroom? Because that is a huge problem within Well, it can take a lot of water and a lot of children trying to.
Ooh, okay. I'm like, let's see.
A root bound plant.
Yeah. Fiddle leaf figs, honestly, not gonna lie, I might be pretty happy. What I would probably do is, I would almost consider, what kind of plants are they?
They're the pothos.
Oh, sweet, okay.
They're beautiful. They're very wet.
Okay.
I mean, I have at least 24 per classroom.
Oh,
There's
wow,
like
okay.
24 kids in a classroom.
Oh, okay.
And so they're just happily watering them.
Ooh, okay. I'm trying to
You guys
think.
can, like, really
Maybe
hydrate
like-
the soil, so it just kind of falls through.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly,
Oh, you're watering
like,
plants. Good job. Yeah.
I'm trying to think.
We can circle back.
Maybe
to
like
it.
a
I was just
peace
curious
lily
if
or
it's
something.
Yeah, I would say peace lilies might be a good option.
I have the peace lilies, but they're toxic in the classroom. So
Oh.
outside of the classroom, in my lobby.
Okay. Spider plants could also probably tolerate it too.
Okay.
Or like the airplane plants that we were looking at earlier. I know they can tolerate a little bit more water because they've got like a nicer grassier like look to them.
Okay.
Um, and so now that we've got all of our pests knocked out, I just wanted to open this up to any questions. Yes.
I need to ask everyone to be in the trust tree and not judge me for what I'm about to share.
No judgment.
There, twice a year, I find like a couple thousand tiny little dead bugs on like a set of windowsills in my house.
Okay.
It's extremely disgusting, and I haven't been able to sort it out because we have a lot of houseplants, and because it's like happening maybe in a 24-hour cycle, so by the time we notice it, it's usually already over.
Okay.
So trying to separate the plants and move them when I'm not exactly sure when this thing is gonna happen, I don't know exactly which plant it's happening from, but man,
Do they look like gnats? Do they have wings?
they do fly,
Okay.
but they can't get far, they seem pretty dumb.
And super slow, like
They die quickly.
you can kind of watch them like go like.
Well,
Yeah.
because I'm not finding them when they're alive. It's like they have such a short life cycle. It's like
Okay.
one day
Mhm.
I'll go to water the plants, and sometime between the last watering cycle and this one, there will be thousands
Okay.
of teeny tiny little black dots all over.
I would definitely use the mosquito bits.
bits.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's gonna be your best bet with the mosquito
You
bits.
just treat all of the plants that are over there, and don't worry if I'm treating plants that don't need it.
Right. Yeah. So it's not gonna hurt the plant. It's not something that's taken up into the plant. It's just something that is in the soil.
Okay, and then I need to do that like once a month.
I believe so. It should say on there how often to do it.
But just that because this is only happening twice a year.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm gonna need to do that really consistently.
Probably
for, like, 6
consistently.
months,
Let's
and
see.
make sure that I have them out. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. And then with that, I would also suggest sticky traps in like a couple of the plants. The sticky traps are going to be attracted to them. A lot of times we'll carry them. They look like a little butterfly. So it's not hideous, but it is going to be a bright yellow butterfly in your plant. Yes. Question. Yes.
Yeah, no, just two things. I also had success with like those fans that have the little light on top for nighttime.
We have those.
Yeah, for me it also helped. But I have like spiders where those little bugs show up. I noticed that like right by the wall there's like a little bit of, for me at least. So I don't know if that might be the case. But the other question was for the gnats.
Mhm.
They're not harmful to the plant, right?
No.
It's just an inconvenience for us.
Yeah. So the gnats show up when the soil stays a little bit too wet, but happens to the best of us. You can also let the soil dry out too much in one go, and that usually kills them back too. But what happens is there's a natural fungus that's allowed to build up in the soil that the fungus gnats will feed on. They will eat that decomposing matter, and so they've got a benefit in their life, but they are kind of gross, and I usually do my best to try to keep them away.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, yes.
Okay. So I have plastic pots.
Okay.
Is that a no-no?
No. So the only thing with plastic pots is the plants might dry out a little bit faster.
Okay. It's like the pot and then it has a little space where it's like catching the water.
Okay.
But I noticed that my plants, like as time goes on, they start to die. Like not all of them, but they don't regress. They seem sickly, like yellowing, browning. I'm asking this question because I'm like, should I put rocks at the bottom? Do you think that would help?
Does the pot have a hole in the bottom? Like, or is it allowed to hold water?
I don't know.
So if it's allowed to hold water, what might be happening is there's just a buildup of water in there that is starting to touch the soil, and so the plant is just sitting in water. Whenever the plants are dying, do they start turning yellow? And so it probably is watering. What I would suggest is getting a hole in the bottom, or if you can put some rocks in there as well, that should help.
So the rocks and the little tray for.
Yeah, I probably would, just to get started, make sure that it's out of the water. You're welcome. You had a question.
Well, it's sort of the same question, but I've got a couple of nice big clay pots that I really like that do not have a hole in the bottom. So you're saying that the rocks that I have put in the bottom, that's okay to do?
Yes, you'll want to be careful with watering. So I usually don't suggest it for people that are just getting started with gardening. But the other thing is plants break the rules all the time. And so as long as you're cautious of overwatering, just making sure that anytime you water, the plant's really needing it, or if you do water and the leaves turn yellow, I would wait an extra while. But if anyone does have pots that they do want drilled, we can drill pots for you here. Just get a hole in there for you. Yes.
What's your favorite house plant?
So my favorite common house plant is definitely the Monstera. It is a consistent grower, easy to take care of. You can get them in a bush, you can get them in a vine. There's so much versatility among those plants. A lot of times they're called the Swiss cheese. So the Swiss cheese plants are usually my favorite. To get a little nerdy, I do love anthuriums a lot. The flowering, like the flamingo flowers. I'm just really fascinated with how they grow.
I have a question about a monstera. We have a huge one at home, but we didn't put it on a pole
Okay.
early on, and so now I almost feel like it's too late, and it's kind of grown like everywhere, and it's flopping around. Is it too late to go back and put a pole in? Because I feel like if I did, it would almost like break the stems to try and.
What I would do is a trellis at that point. So I like to get a fanned trellis, and then I will put it at the back of the pot whenever I repot. And then that allows me to kind of move the plants how I need to move them to make sure that they're facing, like laying up against that trellis. And then I like to recycle and use old bread ties to tie them up to that trellis as they go.
And then is there anything, like the aerial roots have gotten kind of out of control on it too? Is there anything I should be doing with those, or?
Not necessarily. I know some people will cut them off. As long as your pruners are clean, you can just snip them off if it's an aesthetic issue. If you're putting it on a trellis, it is going to give like a really jungle vibe as it grows up. Yes.
If you don't mind, just a comment on
Oh,
that.
yeah, absolutely.
My neighbor, she gave me hers, which was very unruly like that, and I found that you need to go like, especially when it's grown already, go very slowly to try and like pull it back. Sort of like braces, you know, like when you
Mhm.
yeah.
Slowly train it to get back to go to the way that you upright or where however you want it to grow.
Break or anything, but I was able to actually get it upright and not be like.
Right.
Yes.
I'm gonna try and repot my elephant ear plants because it is also just kind of like this.
Okay.
So what is it's a pretty good sized plant, and it probably has about 8 leaves on it. So my thing is it's falling and kind of going to the side. I'm using the poles right now to stabilize it, not so much as tying it, because I found when I was gently and loosely tying it at the base, it wasn't producing the leaves, and the leaves are trying to break around it.
Okay.
So how far, if I do replant with this mindset of it right below the soil, right? That's how do I stabilize my plant? Because right now it's
Is it, do you know if it's a colocasia or an alocasia? Like okay, so, different question, same result. Do you know if it has a really thin, like stem? And do the leaves kind of like go up and like down a little bit?
No, they go straight up.
Straight up? Okay.
Yeah.
So it's probably an alocasia. What I would suggest is repotting, making sure that the soil line is where it needs to be.
Okay.
I would put a stake in the center
Okay.
and just tie one of the larger like leaf stems to that stake. But I would also suggest getting it into more light. As long as it's not direct sun, usually my experience is the alocasias will kind of splay out like that when they need a little bit more light. It might also need a little bit more water. Because they can tolerate, I usually water mine whenever the top inch of the soil is dry, especially alocasias or like elephant ears.
Drips water
Yeah.
everywhere off the leaves. Okay.
Okay, yep.
It is beautiful.
I sort of have the same issue, but mine is with Birds of Paradise. One of the main, one of the plants, I guess it's issues with plants, but is very heavy, and I've tried like to stake it, but I feel like it needs a lot of support because it is so heavy.
Mhm.
It wants to like lean, and I didn't want to plant it so deep, but I don't know what else to do.
So I would say earlier we were talking about plants that are okay with being root bound. Bird of Paradise
Is one of them?
realistically prefer to be root bound. They will they maintain their stability in the pot a little bit better when they are root bound. Their watering schedule tends to be a little bit more consistent, I would say, and it prevents them from wanting to lean like that. Are the older leaves kind of curling up?
No,
Okay.
they're not. They're pretty nice and open.
Okay.
I know I do have a humidity issue because the new leaf was having a hard time unfurling.
Okay.
So I'm playing around with that, but I was thinking of repotting it, because I also changed the soils that I use to not be so hydrophobic. And then maybe that has to do with it too? I know these are very specific questions.
No, that's okay. So I usually like to keep them in I usually like to keep them a little bit root bound. And if with Bird of Paradise and palms, if I'm ever having an issue with like humidity and the leaf doesn't want to unfurl, I'll get a paper towel, like a warm paper towel, wet it, and then wrap it around that leaf for a little bit. So nothing too hot, but you create like a little steaming environment on that specific leaf, and it really just pops it right open.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That is nice.
Yes.
Hi. So for example, this leaf starts to turn brown.
Okay.
What do I do? Do I cut it at the base? Will it repair itself?
So all the plants that we've got are a little bit different, but if we all take a look at our plants, you can usually see where the plant is growing from and see where the older leaves are at. So like on the monsteras, you'll notice that there is, like on the newest leaf, there's gonna be a little bit of a swollen spot on the back of the stem. So if the newest leaf is starting to brown, I wouldn't wanna cut that one all the way out yet until a new leaf comes out. However, if it's one like down here, this one is, that's a new leaf as well. This one, I would say this one. So this one's a little bit of an older leaf. It's kind of losing its like shine, a little less green. I like to cut it back to the main vine, but I don't want to cut the vine. Because if you cut the vine, the plant is going to have to restart a new shoot there. So as long as you're not cutting off new growth or a new growth point, you should be good.
You follow the same rule for the bigger monstera and the seal.
Absolutely. Yeah, so like this one is the newest leaf on this little branch. And so if this leaf were going out, I would just cut it right there where that stem is. Okay, cool. Well. Alrighty, well, I just wanted to say thank y'all so much for coming
Thank
today.
you guys.
We really enjoyed it. Allie and I will be hanging around for a little bit if y'all have got any other questions. If you'll see Allie on the way out for your $10 coupon.
Somewhere I've got some
you're welcome.
coupons
Thank y'all
for
coming
you
today.
guys.
We appreciate it.
Thank
You're welcome. I'm so glad. glad you did. I have been looking forward to it too. So
You love this one before?
I've not done this one. I've done the Houseplants 101, and then I've